the 12-year-old boy, and then the soldiers crash through the window. The charge is seditious poetry.
I think 30,000 people have been killed. A social entrepreneurial organization who goes into the world's most dangerous places to do their work. But they go into the world's most dangerous places, Greg. They end up going in there and dealing with the heads of government adhere to the rule of law.
Right.
We're dedicating a portion of the proceeds to the organization that inspired the story, because it's important for them to be able to continue the work that they're doing. But and also demonstrate the fact that evil, that there's humanity within the evil. And, this man is far from a nice guy. They are still there. They're still trying to do the wrongs that have been going on, at least get some of the rights returned to people so that they're not, the oppression is not quite so extreme. It's not really, the government is not being very good about how they're treating their people.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's horrible. And are we in danger?
We're in danger. The danger for us is if we put people on the ground in danger. So we have to be very careful. I want to add, to me, it's the family. Article 5 group is the family, and we have worldviews. And so it was very intentional for us. But I think it's also very, comforting. Readers enjoy coming back to home base, especially when the books are set in foreign locations. But we have the steadiness, the sometimes disagreements, but often working together to reach a goal. So they provide humor, warmth, and they also provide diversity and storylines.
How did the two of you from such different worlds come together to create Metal Viper? And what was it about this particular story that kind of demanded both of your voices?
Welcome to Inside Personal Growth Podcast. Deep dive with us as we unlock the secrets to personal development, empowering you to thrive. Here, growth isn't just a goal, it's a journey. Tune in, transform, and take your life to the next level by listening to just one of our podcasts.
Welcome back to Inside Personal Growth. This is Greg Voisen, the host of Inside Personal Growth. And you guys, everybody knows who I am because they've listened to the show for years. We're on 19 years, 1,300 episodes. Sitting on the other side of the screen in Santa Fe, New Mexico, they said it was spitting snow this morning. Is that right, you guys?
Yeah.
A little bit. Is Ron Schultz, someone that I have known for quite some time, and Sarah Lovett, who basically they have teamed up and written a book, which you'll be seeing. It'll pop up here on the screen, everybody, called Metal Viper. And I was intrigued by this because Ron basically sent me the copy of the book, and they've got something really interesting for you to listen to today. Well, good day to you both. How you doing?
Doing just fine, Greg.
Great, Greg.
Good.
Happy to be
Good.
here.
Well, I'm going to do a brief introduction. Ron is an accomplished author, speaker, and social innovation thought leader who's written and or co-written and edited 25 published books spanning social innovation, meditation, emergent science, and entrepreneurship. His notable works include Creating Good Work, the world's leading social entrepreneurs show how to build a healthy economy. The Complex Buddhist is another one of his books, and the list goes on and on. Beyond publishing, Ron has had an extensive career in television film with credits that include acclaimed CBS Movie of the Week, The Switch, and writing 6 of 36 episodes, of which the iconic children's series He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. He does. He has spoken at Skoll World Forum, and the World CRS Congress and Social Enterprise World Forum. He is really just an amazing man, and I love Ron. He's also an active fiction writer, and the novel we're talking about, Metal Viper, is the one we're going to be speaking about today. Now, the lovely woman to on my camera to the right is Sarah Lovett. She's an international best-selling author, psychological thrillers, and espionage fiction based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is where they're joining us from today. She's best known for her Sylvia Strange series, which sparked publishing bidding war and has been translated in 12 language and optioned for film and television. Her extensive catalog includes Dangerous Attachments, Acquired Motives, A Desperate Silence, and the list goes on. And both of you, we're going to have links to the website below so that people can find you. What sets Sarah apart is her deep real-world experience behind it. She holds a degree in criminal justice from the University of New Mexico and worked within the state's Office of the Attorney General, where she conducted in-depth research into organized crime and public corruption. Well, you guys have a really interesting background, and obviously the kind of background that Metal Viper really kind of brought up for you, the two of you. So I'm going to start this off with Ron. You spent all this time writing social innovation, mindfulness books. You're really into Buddhism. You are a wonderfully spiritual person. And Sarah, you've built a career on forensic psychology, thrillers, and co-authors in spy novels, and former CIA operative Valerie Plume. How did the two of you from such different worlds come together to create Metal Viper? And what was it about this particular story that kind of demanded both of your voices?
Good.
Whoever.
I'll start with kids brought us together. A long time ago when we were both writing for John Muir Publications, that's when we met. A regional press, and I was writing the extremely weird books, and Ron was writing sports books.
So X-ray vision.
X-ray vision. And
Those books.
we liked each other, and we hit it off, and socialized, and then
Yeah, then I came up with this notion of writing a book, a thriller about a social entrepreneurial organization who goes into the world's most dangerous places to do their work. And I had known one that had a woman as the head of this organization. And I knew that I couldn't write it by myself, that I needed to write it with a woman. I called up Sarah and I said, Sarah, you work with all these different authors. Do you know somebody who would like to write this with me? And Sarah raised her hand and said, I would.
So that's how this book was birthed, is really just that way.
Turned out to be the best collaboration either of us have had. It's just been wonderful.
so fun. Yeah, great.
Well, for all my listeners, by the time this airs, there'll be a link below that'll be directing you to Amazon to buy Metal Viper. So it will be out there and listed. We don't have a copy of the book, but you'll see behind me on the screen, you'll see the JPEG of that. So look, you guys, the book opens with one of the most heartbreaking scenes that I've read in a long time. A 12-year-old boy named Vika, Vika, wrapping freshly baked naan in the pages of his father's peace poems in their bakery in Yangon. And then the soldiers crash through the window. The charge is seditious poetry. Is this a real charge in Myanmar? And what was it about the child's poet or a children's poet that became the emotional anchor for this entire story?
Well, it is there was a poet who had been arrested, and there had been an article about him in the paper, and this is what gave birth to this notion. And in Yangon, he was arrested for writing poetry and giving it out, and it wasn't seditious; it was just poetry, and it was it was such an unconscionable action to arrest a poet that we figured that this would be a great opportunity for our character to go and do what she does.
Well, I know we said there are some similar things which the Americans are dealing with today, and we weren't going to go deep into that, but we have been seeing people be arrested, okay, here in our own land of the United States. Um, and it has to be alarming to those out there. Well, how would you guys kind of say this story has some similarities which might be happening here today?
Um, well, oppressive powers, um, it's very um, disturbing to live in an environment with where thugs can come, whether they're soldiers crashing through windows or into a bakery to take a 12-year-old boy and his father, or in this country to detain, there have been children who've become viral characters, people rooting for them. And I think um, no one wants that extreme. I think very few people want to have children being put behind bars and detained. And also people who are detained without the right to transparency and the right to appear in court and to have the rule of law um, buffer you in a way. And so you're not just spirited away in the night and disappear.
Yeah, and this is really about the rule of law, and in terms of um, coming down on people who are writers, who are putting the word out, who are sending out, getting information out, journalists and intellectuals, who are a threat to any kind of authoritarian government.
Yeah, and it's a very real thing. We've seen censorship happen to TV hosts here in
Yeah.
this country. And the underlying theme here is really injustice. I think both of you stand for justice. And the protagonist, Kay Zahn, is extraordinary. She's barely 5 feet tall, Chinese American, went to UCLA, to Yale Divinity School, founded Article 5 in Geneva, and she opens the book by telling her team she just channels her inner, and you're going to have to say it, Sisyphus, and starts rolling that demand rock around. Where did Kay come from? Is she based on the real person, or is she the kind of leader you both wish existed?
Well, she was inspired by a real person. We are being very careful with identities here because Myanmar is so dangerous. And so we don't want to, really talk more about who she is directly, but it is inspired by a real person. And it's inspired by an organization that is doing real work in the world and doing amazing work in the world. But they go into the world's most dangerous places, Greg, and without fear to do this work. And they may have a little fear, I don't know, but they end up going in there and dealing with the heads of government to get them to adhere to the rule of law. And the notion is that all these countries that are using torture as an investigative tool all have signed a UN charter that says they will not do this. And so that's what's being upheld here in real time.
That's amazing. So this Article 5
Right.
is named after the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where he's
That's
talking
correct.
about justice. The article that prohibits torture.
That's correct.
Okay. In the book, Kay's team has actually succeeded in getting Myanmar to curtail torture before the 2021 coup destroyed everything they'd built. How much of that mirrors the real experiences of organizations still working inside Myanmar, and how much risk did you take in writing about the work that's still going on?
Well, Myanmar is a real awful place right now since this coup, and it completely destroyed all the work that people have done before. But they are now the reason we have to be so careful is that they are still there. They're still trying to do right the wrongs that have been going on, at least get some of the rights returned to people so that they're not the oppression is not quite so extreme. It it's not really, the government is not being very good about how they're treating their people. I think 30,000. I think the figure was 30,000 people have been killed.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's horrible. And are we in danger?
We're in danger. The danger for us is if we put people on the ground in danger. So we have to be very careful.
And we were in crafting,
Marketing.
in crafting the book.
Right.
But at the same,
Fiction.
it is fiction. And at the same time, we were careful, but we didn't sacrifice or compromise any of the story. The story is still incredibly thrilling and really is quite exciting, we think.
So it's really a true story. You just kind of remade it fiction and you made up the characters. And so, but Article 5 team is one of the greatest strengths of this book. And you got, is it Anna? Anan, this Persian, say it for me,
Zorro.
who fled Iran as a child and serves as Kay's financial guardrail, right? So that's important. So Nanny, is non-binary, wears her facial scar as a badge of surviving violence, and keeps a Be Free and Die rainbow mug on her desk. Sahar, Baha'i shaman, trained in Myanmar, hallucinogenic fungi, which is for all those out there, that's mushrooms. And Tiffany from Texas, this 23-year-old, reading about cortisol at the Geneva airport. This team is widely diverse, as we just talked about. Was that intentional to show that the fight for human rights requires every kind of person at the table? Look, we've seen all this stuff going on around trans and taking the people away, and I'm just going to say it, Trump trying to have diversity and going to the universities and suing the universities because they weren't upholding diversity. These, we might say, were small little inroads, but really pretty big ways to try and control our university system. And I hope I'm not speaking out of line here, but I think the people get it.
Yeah. Well, our crowd of characters here were all chosen to not only to represent their own groups, but to show that diversity within a work organization.
Mhm.
And one of the characteristics of certainly of my books, of my fiction writing, is always a bit of where we bring in that area of the shamanistic and the qualities that go along with that has been characterized by so many different writers when they bring in things that are a little outside of the norm. And so this has very much been a part of what's important to us, is to be able to demonstrate that this is not the only way things are, that things can be different, that we can bring in that non-ordinary world, in the case of Shahir, and demonstrate that there are lots of ways to get to Rome.
A lot of viewpoints. I just want to add, to me, it's the family. Article 5 group is the family, and we have our families, all our families are made up with many different viewpoints and worldviews. And so it was very intentional for us, but I think it's also very, comforting. Readers enjoy coming back to home base, especially when books are set in foreign locations. But we have the steadiness, the sometimes disagreements, but often working together to reach a goal. So they provide humor, warmth, and they also provide diversity and storylines.
I will add that the magical realism aspect that we've included into this is actually crucial to the story. And we also refer to our shaman not so much as a shaman, but he's referred to as the cultural attaché. So it is, we are trying to be inclusive and at the same time be able to further the story. And these people certainly do that.
Well, Metal Viper is a really interesting book. The book is being published at a pretty extraordinary moment. Myanmar just marked 5 years since the coup. The UN reports 30,000 political prisoners detained, 8,000 killed by the junta, shaman elections held under military airstrikes, and 5.2 million people displaced. Okay, so when you look at the statistics, it's pretty alarming. The prologue of your book reads almost like a news report from last week, which is difficult watching real events become more horrific than your fiction as you are writing this, right? In other words, it's just like it's ongoing, it's real time, it's happening now. Uh, you guys want to comment on that?
Sure. I don't think
Well, the prescience is you speak to any writers who are writing fiction, and they always find that there's a certain level of prescience in what they're writing, that they are able to have a sense of what's going on in the world and what's the future. And so what we were writing was purely what was happening. We
right.
were consulted by folks who really know what was going on the ground, and that was very helpful.
And how did you two get to these people to actually do interviews or actually put this into the book? I think that'd be interesting for the readers because you got a scene in here where the team encounters a group, and I think it's I don't know if I'm going to partner the Rohingya refugees in the jungle with Campo and their own guide and driver, a man who'd been risking his long life alongside them, reveals a deep-seated prejudice against them called the Bengalis and saying that they didn't belong. And then Kay confronts him, right? So you get these stories and you weave them in here, Sarah. And so my question for the readers is, hey, did you guys get an opportunity to hear these stories from somebody where they were really happening? And if they were, did that help to validate this even more for you?
I mean, we did a lot of research, and a lot of the research was it was people,
Yeah.
right? Talking to people who do this work and people who are aware of situations around the world. And so there's a lot of truth
Yeah.
in this story, even though it's a fiction, right? And we also we it was very important for us that there is nuance. We were representing the fact that it's not black and white, right? We all have biases, all of us.
Yeah.
And situations of conflict can raise the heat of those biases to an extreme, right? To hatred. And and governments feed that often. So it was important for us that everyone wasn't on the same page, and it's about listening but also hearing these stories. So hopefully our readers will take that with the fact that these are also, I think, characters fully rounded that we attach to. So in the case of Champo, it is a surprise at that point because he has been a trooper, right? A really part of the team, really. And then all of a sudden, this bias, this crack in his system, psyche, being, shows, and and it's not pretty,
No.
but it's very human for all of it.
Okay. I think that's an important point that you make that we've had these biases, as you just mentioned. I've seen it create divides even in my own family. And
Yep.
there's millions of families across the United States where you have people that voted for Trump and people who are so and crazily opposed, right? But they're just such extremes, right? And I think this recent thing that just happened regarding we have a shutdown here in this country right now with the Department of Homeland Security's ICE as a result of our two Republican and Democratic sides can't come together to agree. Take off your masks, have cameras on, let us see what's going on, be honest about what's happening out there when you're doing these things. I think there's such a correlation between what our Congress is hoping to get to accomplished, right? Uh, and you guys want to comment about that before I go on the next question? Because I know we didn't want to get political here, but kind of had to
a
go
little bit because your question was, where did we find the resources for this?
right originally, yeah.
And we had incredible experts who had been in Myanmar, who had worked in Myanmar, who had worked with the Rohingya, who had worked with these different areas, and we were fed almost a daily stream of information about what was going on the ground that we could pull from.
That's
As-
awesome.
so that we could then
Right.
incorporate that into the story that we were telling, and all of that information informed what we were writing in a way that we could then turn it into fiction so that we could tell a compelling story.
Did it make it harder for the two of you to write because the information was just kind of coming in as you got it, or at some point you have to complete a book and you keep getting more information, right? So
We didn't know what the story was, Greg. So
Story. Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I knew where we were going, but I don't think it made it more difficult.
No, we've both been writing all our lives. So, we're used to writing.
Good.
Whatever's going on.
Yeah.
Well, one of the most powerful threads in the book is Kay's inner tension between her mission and her family. She calls her sons Birdie and
Ishi.
and Ishi from a hotel lobby in Myanmar, and the Viper walks up and says, "When you speak with your husband Peter and your two boys Bertie and Ishi, if I remember correctly, do you tell them you love them? It says it might well be longer than you think before you see them again."
Yeah.
That scene is pretty chilling. Um, and how do you write the emotional reality of a mother who puts herself in danger for other people's children? I mean, we've seen this happen here, Sarah.
Right. We have. And we've seen people die trying to help other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I'm a mother, and being a mother, my daughter's 22 now, but as soon as she was in my life, my mantra became, all children are my children. So, and I know that's true of, you don't have to be a mother just to be someone with compassion and empathy, to see that. And there are mothers in this country doing everything they can to raise money for people who are suffering here, right? And may be imprisoned. So I think that's a very interesting tension for a character. And I know that as a mother working professionally as a writer, they're long hours and working. And so sometimes my daughter would be crying, saying, "Mom, why are you a writer? You spend so much time writing." And I said, "It's not really a choice. It's always been my
Calling. Yeah.
my calling." But I think that's true. And watching, um, you know, Gaza, and watching, I worked with a writer who was with the UN, and he was writing about Rwanda. And it takes a toll even as a writer to deal with these things. But in the case of Metal Viper in that scene, he's a person. He's a full person, and he comes, and one of the ways he works is He's all about power. And so but he's very subdued in many ways with it because Kay knows she can be, disappeared or killed that moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she struggles with that. I think it's hard in the family, and her kids struggle with that. They miss their mother, but they understand the mission.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's uniquely qualified to do what she does. She's unique.
Yeah. And having that tension with the viper is when the metal viper shows up is just to introduce the evil, if you will, and also demonstrate the fact that evil is, that there's humanity even within the evil. And this man is far from a nice guy, but at the same time he is Kay has learned that her power is in her ability to relate to people, no matter where they're coming from.
It really very interesting because it brings out so many similarities about people even here in the U.S. looking at certain figures with more hate, right? More disdain, and even the things they would say they would like to have happen to them, right? Like that's what they want. Now, without me giving away too much, the climax involves something I never expected in the human rights thriller. It's got bees and elements and a shaman entering what Sahar calls the non-ordinary space. It's magical and terrifying, and obviously it works. How did you decide that the resolution to the story would involve forces of nature rather than conventional military rescue? And this brings me to Sarah and Ron. Um, when, pardon me, Jane Goodall died, and she did the 4-minute message or
Yes.
whatever it was, and
Her
she
last words.
had the foresight to videotape herself and then said, release this afterwards.
Right.
Now, she even looked at the villain in that videotape, the villains, and actually named some of them because I was in tears when I watched that video. How did you guys come to a Jane Goodall ending here?
Well, Greg, it goes back to an old writing adage that if you show an elephant in Act 1, you had better use the elephant by the end of the book.
I got that, Ron. But, all jest aside, there is something about nature is calming, and you want a resolution. So did you guys, obviously you thought this through in writing this book, that you wanted the world to find peace?
Yeah.
Well, we wanted to find the world we wanted to have a conclusion that did not use the same elements that the forces against them used. And that there are other ways of solving a problem than with force. And in this case, we weren't really interested in defeating this other force. We were interested in resolving the situation.
Right.
And it was, and this seemed to be a way to do it, and a way that actually exists. Of using of bringing about this, as I said, using the elephants. They were something we had introduced in the book, and so that we needed
environment.
and they're part of the environment, and we just needed to be able to resolve that at the end.
And we love elephants.
Yeah. So do we around here. They're all over the house. So, hey, so you guys got, and hopefully I don't mispronounce his name, Richard Roshi?
Richard Rioch.
Rioch. He's the former global media chief of Amnesty International.
Yeah.
Endorsed this book, right?
Yeah.
You also acknowledged contributors you can't name because of Myanmar's prevailing forces. How important was it for you to get this right, not just as a fiction, but as a book that real human rights workers could stand behind? Because this is a big endorsement. Let's face it, you guys. I mean, it just doesn't come along like, hey, I'm going to get this guy to endorse this book. He must have really thought long and hard about that.
We have some great endorsements for the book, and we're very pleased with that. Not only Richard, but Valerie Plame gave us a wonderful quote, and Elliot Patterson, who's a brilliant writer, gave us a great quote. All of them are working against authoritarian and oppressive countries and wanted to support the work that we're doing. And it was absolutely essential to what we were doing. And they were all part of it. Yeah. Go ahead.
I was saying it is vital that we're able to stand behind our book and the work because of their validating comments and also their information. Some of those people shared information. Richard did.
Yeah.
That's okay to say.
Yeah.
We had to get it right.
Yeah. It had to be
Right as
plausible.
we could.
It had to be plausible. If it wasn't plausible, then it would just be, shoved aside. And we don't want this book to be shoved aside because the message is important, because what's going on in this book is important. And people need to become aware of these issues. And we didn't want it to be dismissed because the story wasn't plausible. So all the details had to be attended to.
Well, let's face it, you took something that you could have written about in a nonfiction way, other than you were trying to protect the characters here, and you turned it into fiction. And, when you look at my show, we have tons of nonfiction books that are on here. But the reality, this is an opportunity for people to actually get into these characters, to understand what's going on, to really understand what's happening, and then actually correlate that. And that brings me to this. For the listeners now who've been listening to us for the last 40 minutes or so, want to get involved, whether that's supporting the people of Myanmar, learning more about global flight against torture, or simply picking up Metal Viper, where should they go and what should they do first?
Well,
they wanted to actually get involved.
You can the book is available now, and you can order it. You can pre-order it at any bookstore right today. At any bookstore,
pre-order
where you can pre-order it. So the book is available
first.
That's that's the first part. The second part is there are organizations that the listener can get involved with. And
Frontier Myanmar.
Frontier Myanmar is one of them. There are a whole slew of organizations that are working to help the situation in Myanmar. But at the same time, you can also start with yourself. If you start looking at your own prejudices, your own ways of seeing the world and how the world shows up, that's a really critical way to begin really doing something that makes a change in the world.
Inner work, right? Whatever form you take for that.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know what you had going on with the publishers, but do any part of the proceeds go to help fund this program against this corruptions in Myanmar? That would be a really good thing for people to know maybe they're supporting. So part of it is, okay, good.
It is.
Right.
We're dedicating a portion of the proceeds to the organization that inspired the story, because it's important for them to be able to continue the work that they're doing. And so we are dedicating a portion of our proceeds to them.
And can you give us a link for our listeners, so if they wanted to make their own contribution, we could stick it in the show notes below?
We'll check with them about that, but I think that we can.
Okay.
It's they're a prominent organization, but they also have to be very careful of their people on the ground, and that's what they've been really. We've been talking to them a lot about that, about respecting that we want them to, we want their people to be safe. And just as an example, their head of finance in Myanmar was thrown in jail for 10 years for making a donation to the wrong organization.
Oh, wow.
So things are,
I understand the sensitivity, and if we can put it up there, great. If we can't, it's not
Yeah.
anything. I think just people knowing buying the book is supporting it, and Ron and Sarah will do that. I want to thank you both for taking this time to address the listeners of Inside Personal Growth and for sharing this story and bringing light to it. And hopefully, this story and your book, Metal Viper, will drive some action by the listeners of this podcast and will get people involved, even if that action, Sarah, is where you mentioned during this podcast, is as mothers to try and resolve the conflicts in the families that have been going on even in our own country, to try and bring some harmony back to this, and instead of having a divide, bring people back together again.
And bringing food and driving, people to appointments and doctor's appointments when they're afraid to go out of their house. Simple. It can be very simple. Toys for kids. And yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can start in your own neighborhood.
Start at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also reach out to organizations, and we'll have more of that for you to play.
Good.
And also proceeds are going to help on the book.
Namaste to you both. Thank you for being on the podcast with me this morning. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Sure.